The wind whipped fiercely through the streets of Manhattan that evening, slicing through coats and scarves like knives made of ice. It was the kind of cold that seeped into bones and lingered, no matter how many layers one wore. Evelyn Carter, 83 years old and barely 5 feet tall, moved slowly but deliberately through the snow-covered sidewalk. Her gloved hands clutched a faded brown handbag, and her coat, frayed at the sleeves and patched over the years, did little to shield her from the bitter chill. The Silver Crest Hotel loomed ahead, an opulent structure bathed in golden lights that shimmered against the falling snow. Towering glass windows offered a glimpse into a world far removed from Evelyn's own, a world of luxury, champagne toasts, and people who'd never known the price of loneliness. She paused at the grand entrance, her breath fogging the glass doors as she hesitated. Memories from decades past rushed back to her. She had walked through those very doors with her late husband, Arthur, when he was still the head chef at the hotel's prestigious restaurant. Back then, she was greeted with warmth and familiarity. The staff knew her name. Guests nodded in passing. It had felt, in some small way, like home. But Arthur had passed away 10 years ago, and time, as it always does, had moved on without ceremony. The faces at the hotel changed, the uniforms modernized, the decor updated with each passing year. Now, standing before the grand structure once again, Evelyn looked more like a ghost than a guest. With a shiver, she reached out and pushed the door open. The warmth inside hit her instantly, wrapping her in a sudden wave of heat and scent. Fresh lilies, polished wood, and the faint trace of expensive perfume. The lobby was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung like galaxies above marble floors, and a grand piano played softly in the corner. Bellhops glided past with perfect posture, wheeling luggage for couples draped in fur and silk. No one noticed her at first. She approached the reception desk slowly. The young man behind the counter, tall, neatly groomed, with slicked back hair and a name tag that read Dylan, didn't look up right away. He was tapping something on a tablet, earbuds peeking from under his ear. Evelyn waited patiently. When he finally looked up, his expression faltered for a brief moment as he scanned her appearance. His eyes lingered on her tattered coat, the scuffed boots, and the gentle tremble in her hand as she reached for the counter. He offered a tight-lipped smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone laced with the kind of politeness reserved for inconvenience. "I'd like a room for the night," Evelyn said, her voice soft but clear. "Just one night. Something quiet, if possible." Dylan blinked. "Do you have a reservation?" "No. I was hoping to get something on short notice." He tapped on his tablet with exaggerated purpose, then shook his head. "Unfortunately, we're fully booked." Evelyn glanced around. The lobby was busy, yes, but not overflowing. "Are you sure? Even a smaller room would do." "I don't need much." "Ma'am," Dylan said, his voice sharpening slightly, "this is the Silver Crest. We don't typically do walk-ins, especially during the winter gala season. You'd have better luck down the street at the Parkside Motel." A woman nearby snickered, and Evelyn turned to see two younger hotel clerks whispering behind the counter. One of them, a brunette in bright red lipstick, leaned in and said just loudly enough to be heard, maybe she got lost on her way to the shelter. Evelyn's cheeks flushed with shame. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She wasn't used to this kind of treatment. She had lived a quiet, modest life, never wealthy, but always respected. Being dismissed like a beggar in a place that once felt like home pierced deeper than she expected. She steadied herself. "Please, I have the money," she said, reaching into her handbag and producing a small envelope. Inside was just over $400, enough for a standard room and dinner. Dylan took one look at the envelope inside. "Ma'am, with all due respect, even our cheapest room is well above that. We cater to a different clientele." "Is that so?" came a voice from behind. Everyone at the desk turned. A tall man in a tailored coat stood at the entrance, brushing snow from his shoulders. He looked to be in his mid-30s, handsome and confident, with a presence that immediately drew attention. Evelyn's eyes widened, but she said nothing. Dylan straightened. "Good evening, Mr. Lennox. Welcome back, sir." The man nodded once but kept his eyes on Evelyn. "Is there a problem here?" "No, sir," Dylan said quickly. "Just a minor misunderstanding." Evelyn quietly tucked the envelope back into her bag. "It's quite all right," she said. "I'll be on my way." As she turned to leave, her legs shook slightly. She had hoped to spend the night in warmth and comfort, to revisit the memories she and Arthur had shared here so long ago. But she was not wanted. Not here. Not anymore. She reached the door just as the wind howled again, rattling the glass. Her hand trembled as she pulled out a small flip phone. Outdated, scratched, but functional. She dialed a number she hadn't used in a long time. It rang once, twice. "Mom," came the voice on the other end. Warm, deep, familiar. "Daniel," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I didn't want to bother you, but—" "Where are you?" he asked immediately. "Are you all right?" "I'm at the Silver Crest. I tried to get a room, but they said no." There was a pause. Then his voice turned cold. "Stay right there." The line clicked. Behind her, the lobby carried on as if nothing had happened. Dylan returned to his tablet. The staff whispered and laughed. Guests moved to and fro, sipping wine and sharing stories. No one noticed the elderly woman sitting silently on the small bench by the door, her eyes closed, her fingers clutched tightly around the phone in her lap. But the peace wouldn't last long. 20 minutes later, the soft hum of the hotel's evening routine was shattered by the roar of engines. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the front entrance, followed closely by two more. The doorman rushed outside, only to freeze when he saw who stepped out. Daniel Carter, billionaire, CEO of the Carter International Group, and as of 3 months ago, the new owner of the Silver Crest hotel chain. Inside the lobby, Dylan's face drained of color as he recognized the man striding toward him with fire in his eyes. "Where is she?" Daniel demanded. Before anyone could speak, Evelyn stood. Daniel rushed to her, wrapping his arms around her gently. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I should have been here sooner." She smiled weakly, tears brimming in her eyes. "I didn't want to make a fuss." He turned sharply toward the front desk. "Who turned her away?" No one answered. Daniel's voice dropped, deadly quiet. "Who turned my mother away?" Dylan stepped forward, his voice trembling. I didn't know. She never said. You never asked." The room was silent, save for the sound of snow tapping gently against the windows. "Clear the presidential suite," Daniel barked. "Now, and gather the entire staff. We're going to have a meeting." Evelyn squeezed his hand gently. "Daniel, please, don't make a scene." But it was too late. The Silver Crest Hotel was about to learn who Evelyn Carter really was, and just how far a son would go to protect the woman who had once given up everything for him. And this was only the beginning. The entire atmosphere inside the Silver Crest Hotel had shifted. Where there was once idle chatter, laughter, and the soft tinkle of piano keys, now silence reigned. Staff members hurried to and fro with tense expressions, whispering nervously to one another. The presence of Daniel Carter, business magnate, billionaire, and newly revealed owner of the hotel, had disrupted the evening like a thunderstorm rolling through a peaceful sky. Evelyn sat quietly in the plush armchair near the fireplace in the Grand Lounge, her coat now replaced with a warm cashmere shawl someone had hurriedly brought her. Despite the warmth, she still sat with her hands gently clasped in her lap, her posture humble. She wasn't the type to draw attention or wield power like a weapon. Even now, she didn't want the chaos that had erupted in her son's wake. But it was too late. The wheels were already turning. Daniel stood near the concierge desk, arms folded, his jaw set tight. His dark coat hung open, snow still melting on his shoulders, but he didn't seem to notice or care. His eyes scanned every face behind the counter, not out of anger alone, but disappointment. It wasn't just about how they had treated his mother. It was the deeper message beneath it all. The willingness to judge someone solely on appearance, the ease with which respect was denied to someone who looked like she didn't belong. The hotel manager, a thin, balding man named Geoffrey Linwood, arrived minutes later, his face flushed from the cold and the panic of being summoned mid-dinner. He approached Daniel cautiously. "Mr. Carter, I'm so sorry. If I had known she was your—" "She's not just my mother," Daniel interrupted, his voice sharp. "She's a guest. That should have been enough." Geoffrey opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. There wasn't much he could say. The truth hung heavy in the air. They had failed, not only a customer, but a human being. Daniel turned slightly, gesturing toward the staff that had gathered near the back of the lobby. "Every single one of you needs to ask yourselves tonight, if this woman were your grandmother, your mother, your sister, would you have treated her the same way?" A few lowered their eyes. Others remained frozen, stunned by the reprimand coming not just from a boss, but from a son who had just witnessed his own mother being humiliated. Evelyn's voice cut gently through the tension. "Daniel," she said softly from her seat, "I appreciate you standing up for me, but don't shame them just for my sake. It's not about who I am to you. It's about what kind of place this is going to be." Daniel looked at her, the steel in his expression softening. He walked over, crouched beside her chair, and took her hand. "I know, Mom. But what they did wasn't just rude. It was wrong. And it makes me wonder how many others like you they've turned away without a second thought." Evelyn gave a faint smile. "Then use that fire of yours to build something better." He stood again, turning back to the group. "As of tonight, there will be changes, not just here, but across every Silver Crest property. We're going to lead by compassion, not classism. Every guest will be treated with dignity, because kindness shouldn't be reserved for the rich or the well-dressed." There was a moment of pause before slow, uncertain applause began to ripple through the room. It wasn't just for show. Some of the staff had seen the error of their ways. Others were simply realizing the depth of what had just taken place. Later that night, after the crowd had dispersed and the suite had been prepared, Daniel walked beside his mother toward the elevator. Evelyn was quiet, her thoughts heavy. As the doors slid open, she hesitated. "I wasn't going to tell you I came here," she said softly. Daniel looked at her. "Why not?" She stepped inside the elevator, her hands brushing the gold-etched walls, as if recalling a memory. "Because I didn't want you to think I was chasing the past. This place reminded me of your father. It was our world once, simple, full of little joys. I just wanted to feel that again, if only for one night." Daniel entered behind her, pressing the button for the top floor. The doors closed. "You don't ever have to explain yourself to me," he said, "and you certainly don't need permission to revisit your memories." She smiled faintly, a kind of sadness tucked beneath it. "I miss him more on days like this." "I know," Daniel replied. "So do I." The elevator dinged softly, opening onto the presidential suite. It was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the snow-covered city, velvet drapes, gold fixtures, a roaring fireplace already lit. Evelyn stepped inside slowly, her eyes scanning the room. For a moment, she didn't say a word. Then, walking toward a small table near the window, she pulled out a chair and sat down. "I remember when this was just another room," she said, "back when the hotel was still young. Arthur used to cook for the owner's private guests. Sometimes, after hours, they'd let us come up here. We'd sit and look out at the lights. It made us feel big, even when we had so little." Daniel stood silently behind her, absorbing the weight of her words. He had grown up in modest means, raised by parents who worked tirelessly without complaint. His mother had been the soul of their tiny apartment, his father the quiet strength behind the stove. Everything Daniel had built, The empire, the investments, the name, had roots in that humble beginning. And here she was again, in the same room, surrounded by wealth but draped in the same humility she had always worn. "Would you like to stay here for the week?" Daniel asked gently. "I can arrange everything." She turned toward him, surprised. "You'd let me stay here?" "It's your hotel," he said with a smirk. "I just run it." That made her laugh. A real, soft laugh that cracked through the tension in her chest. "Just one night," she said. "One night to sit here and remember. I think that's all I need." Daniel nodded, walking to the minibar. "Well, then we'll make it a perfect night. What do you say to some hot chocolate?" "With marshmallows." "Of course." As he busied himself, Evelyn looked out over the city. Lights twinkled like stars below. Taxis honked faintly in the distance, and the snow continued to fall. Quiet, relentless, beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, she felt seen. Tomorrow, the world would know what happened here. Daniel's public relations team would ensure it. Not for drama, not for revenge, but as a statement. An elderly woman walked into a luxury hotel and was turned away for looking poor, not knowing she was the mother of the man who owned the building. And in doing so, the hotel staff had exposed something far bigger. A society still too quick to judge worth by wealth. But tonight wasn't about teaching lessons, not for Evelyn. Tonight was about one woman, sitting in the same spot she once had decades ago, remembering a life filled with love, sacrifice, and quiet strength. She sipped her hot chocolate as Daniel joined her at the table, the fire casting a golden glow across their faces. Nothing about the room had truly changed, but everything else had. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the presidential suite, casting a soft golden hue over the room. Evelyn sat quietly at the edge of the bed, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea, eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the city skyline. The snow had stopped, leaving behind a world blanketed in white, peaceful, and untouched, just the way she remembered winters when she and Arthur used to stroll hand in hand through the park across the street. Despite the warmth of the luxurious room and the comfort of being near her son again, her heart carried a weight. The events of the previous night had stirred something deeper in her, not just the humiliation, not just the stares or the laughter, but the reminder of how easily the world could forget its humanity. She had lived long enough to know that moments like these could either fracture a soul or forge it stronger. The suite door opened quietly and Daniel stepped in, holding a paper bag and 2 cups of coffee from the little cafe down the street. He had insisted on going himself, even though his hotel had a gourmet kitchen. Evelyn raised an eyebrow with a smirk. "You walked through the snow for that?" she asked, her voice still soft with sleep. Daniel shrugged as he sat beside her. "You always said their coffee had more love in it." "And the muffins?" "Still warm," he said, pulling one out. "Blueberry, your favorite." She chuckled, taking it gratefully. "I raised you well." He nodded, but his expression shifted. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything that happened, about why you were really here." Evelyn took a small bite of her muffin and looked at him, the taste bringing back memories of breakfasts in their old kitchen. "It wasn't to test your staff, if that's what you're wondering." "I know," Daniel said quickly, "but I also know you didn't just stumble in here by chance." She hesitated for a moment, then put her tea down and met his eyes. "You're right. I came because I was lonely, and I missed what this place used to mean. Before the money, before the name, I wanted to feel connected to something again, something real." Daniel looked at her, guilt stirring behind his calm exterior. He had been so consumed with business deals, travel, and expanding his empire that he hadn't noticed how isolated she'd become. It wasn't that he didn't love her. He adored her. But love, when not shown, can grow cold. And now he was seeing the consequences of his absence. "I should have called more," he admitted. "I should have visited more." Evelyn reached over and squeezed his hand. "You were building a life. One your father and I never could have imagined." We were always proud of you. I don't need grand gestures, Daniel. I just need to know you remember where you came from." He nodded slowly. "I do, Mom. I do. And I want to do something more than just apologize. I want to make things right, not just with you, but with this entire hotel. With every person who ever felt less because someone behind a desk decided they didn't belong." A pause hung between them before Evelyn spoke again. "There's something else I haven't told you," she said. Daniel's brow furrowed. "What is it?" Evelyn looked away for a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't alone last night before I came here. I met a young woman. Her name is Tasha. She was sitting on a bench at the bus stop with a little boy asleep on her lap. She had nowhere to go. I shared my blanket with them. We talked. She told me she'd just lost her job, got evicted, and couldn't find shelter. She was waiting for the night bus to take her to another city, but she didn't have the fare." Daniel blinked, stunned. "You gave her money?" Evelyn shook her head. "No, I gave her my bus pass, and I gave her hope. I told her about this hotel, told her to come here, that maybe they'd help. I thought, maybe they'd see past her struggle and show some kindness." Daniel's stomach twisted. "And they didn't." "No," she whispered. "They laughed at her, just like they laughed at me." Daniel stood up, pacing the room in silence. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" "Because I wanted to believe there was still good in this place without your influence. I wanted to believe that a stranger could walk in and be met with compassion. But I was wrong." His hands clenched into fists. "Do you know where she went?" Evelyn shook her head slowly. "No, I watched the night bus pull away. She was still sitting on that bench." Daniel turned toward his phone. "Then I'll find her." He made several calls, first to the front desk, then to the city shelter database, and finally to a contact in the mayor's office. An hour passed. Then 2. Evelyn sat in silence, watching him work with a quiet admiration. Her son wasn't just angry, he was moved. And when someone like Daniel Carter was moved, things changed. Just after noon, a call came in. They had found Tasha and her son, Marcus, at a small community center downtown. Volunteers said they'd been trying to help, but resources were stretched thin. Daniel gave instructions immediately. A car would be sent, a room prepared, and his personal doctor on call in case they needed anything. That evening, Tasha stood nervously in the grand lobby of the Silver Crest, her arms wrapped tightly around Marcus as he clung to her neck. She wore the same thin jacket, and exhaustion hung heavy in her eyes. When Evelyn walked in, their faces lit up. Tasha stepped forward, tears brimming. You found me," she whispered. "I told you I would," Evelyn said with a soft smile. Daniel approached next, offering his hand. "I'm Daniel, Evelyn's son. And starting today, you're not alone anymore." Tasha hesitated, then took his hand, her lip trembling. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," he replied. "Just rest. You're safe now." As they led her toward a suite prepared just for her and her son, Evelyn looked back at the concierge desk. The same one where she had been humiliated. The same one where Tasha had been turned away. Now, it was the same place where change had begun. That night, the Silver Crest Hotel felt different, not because of wealth or elegance, but because, for the first time in a long while, it felt human again. Snow continued to fall gently outside the towering windows of the Silver Crest Hotel as Daniel stood at the far end of the executive boardroom, staring out at the city. Behind him sat 12 of his highest-ranking executives, all dressed in tailored suits, shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. The room was thick with silence. No one had dared to speak since he entered. He turned slowly, his eyes sharper than usual, not with anger, but with disappointment. He wasn't the kind of man who raised his voice unnecessarily. When Daniel Carter was quiet, it meant something deeper was stirring. "Last night," he began, voice calm but cold, "an elderly woman came here seeking a room. She was dismissed, laughed at, and humiliated by our own staff. Do any of you want to explain that to me? No one moved. Some glanced at each other. Others pretended to study their notes. She wasn't just anyone, Daniel continued. She was my mother. A few gasps rippled through the room, but he didn't give them time to react. And while you're all sitting here collecting six-figure salaries to uphold the image of luxury and excellence, a single mother with her child, cold, hungry, desperate, was also turned away. He let that hang in the air for a moment. I want names, he said flatly. Every single staff member who was on duty last night, every interaction, every camera feed. A young executive tried to speak up. Mr. Carter, with respect, your mother and the woman weren't on the reservation list. Security protocol. Daniel raised a hand, silencing him. Do not quote policy to me when it becomes an excuse for cruelty. There was a long pause. Then Daniel walked over to the window again. We're not just a hotel, he said quietly. We're a symbol. People come here expecting excellence. But that doesn't just mean crystal chandeliers and gold-plated elevators. It means heart. It means dignity. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. He turned back around, fire in his voice now. So here's what's going to happen. We're overhauling everything. Front desk training, security response, employee evaluations. I want community outreach programs established within the month. We will partner with local shelters, create emergency lodging initiatives, and start a foundation under my mother's name for women and children who've been turned away too many times. The room was still, stunned by the weight of his words. And Ethan Grayson, Daniel added sharply. He's terminated, effective immediately. That name rang through the halls like thunder. By sunset, word had spread. Staff whispered in elevators. Housekeeping talked in the break rooms. No one had ever seen Daniel Carter this way. Not angry, not even vengeful, but awakened. Meanwhile, in her suite upstairs, Evelyn sat beside Tasha, who was helping Marcus with a puzzle on the coffee table. The little boy had laughed for the first time in days, a sound so pure it made Evelyn's eyes mist. Thank you, Tasha said quietly, watching her son. For everything. I still can't believe this is real. Evelyn smiled warmly. It's real, sweetheart, and it's just the beginning. They spoke for hours. Tasha shared her story, how she had worked as a hospital janitor until budget cuts forced layoffs, how she had begged her landlord for time, how the world seemed to turn its back one moment at a time, until there was nowhere left to go. Evelyn listened with a mother's patience, offering no judgment, only warmth. Later that evening, Daniel joined them. He watched Tasha and Marcus interact, and his mind raced with ideas. This wasn't just about correcting a mistake anymore. It was about opening a door to something bigger. Tasha, he said, pulling up a chair, how would you feel about working here? Her eyes widened. What? I need someone with strength, with grit, someone who understands people better than most of us. Evelyn told me you used to lead community events at your old church. You've been through things my staff could never understand. That kind of experience, it's priceless. I wouldn't know where to start. Daniel smiled. We'll train you. You'd be our first community liaison coordinator. You'd help guests who might need more than just a room. You'd help build something meaningful. Tasha covered her mouth with one hand, shaking her head in disbelief. Is this really happening? It is, Evelyn said softly, squeezing her shoulder. Because kindness is more powerful than any empire. And you deserve this. Tasha looked down at her son, who had fallen asleep on the rug beside the puzzle, peaceful at last. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. Then yes, I'd love that. In the days that followed, the Silver Crest Hotel transformed. Not overnight, but with purpose. Staff who once rolled their eyes at guests in tattered coats began offering hot tea before they asked questions. A new suite, modest but warm, was reserved every night for someone in crisis. And every Friday, Evelyn personally delivered handmade welcome cards to the people staying there. each signed by Marcus, who insisted on drawing hearts and stars on everyone. Tasha flourished in her role. She greeted guests with a kind of empathy that couldn't be faked. She listened, she comforted, and she made them feel seen. She wasn't just working, she was healing, and in turn, helping others heal too. Ethan Grayson, once the face of cold luxury, now worked across town, his reputation following him like a shadow. He would never forget the moment he saw Evelyn on the cover of a national magazine weeks later, standing proudly beside Daniel and Tasha under the headline, "The Hotel with a Heart." In an industry obsessed with perfection, the Silver Crest had done something radical. It chose to be human. And the world noticed. The days turned into weeks, and the Silver Crest Hotel slowly became more than just a place of refined comfort. It became a story whispered across the city, then echoed in newspapers and online platforms. Guests arrived curious, some skeptical, drawn by the rumors of a hotel that treated people not by their wallet, but by their worth. Reporters called it a social experiment, an oddity in the cutthroat world of luxury hospitality. But those who walked through the grand revolving doors quickly understood it was something else entirely. It was real. The lobby looked the same: elegant marble floors, towering ceilings, and a crystal chandelier that seemed to float like a frozen waterfall in midair. But now, there was a subtle shift in the energy. Staff smiled, not out of obligation, but with sincerity. The concierge desk now offered not only room keys and tourist brochures, but also discreet support, a partnership with local women's shelters, emergency contact cards, and a quiet network for guests who needed more than a pillow and a view. Daniel moved through the hotel like a different man. He no longer saw profits first, he saw purpose. And the numbers followed. Occupancy had increased. Online reviews described moments of unexpected kindness, stories of guests who arrived broken and left with hope. But Daniel wasn't chasing praise. He was chasing something deeper now, something he had learned from watching his mother and the quiet strength of Tasha. One brisk morning, he invited both of them to join him in the hotel's newly repurposed event hall. What once had been reserved for high-end galas and champagne-soaked fundraisers now served a different purpose. Folding chairs replaced banquet tables. The velvet ropes and red carpets were gone. In their place stood a modest stage, a wooden lectern, and a banner that read, "The Evelyn Grace Foundation, because everyone deserves a second chance." Tasha stared at the banner, stunned. Evelyn smiled, her eyes glistening with tears she didn't bother to wipe away. Daniel turned to them. "We launch it today." Tasha's voice trembled. "A foundation. In Evelyn's name. She's the heart behind everything that's happened here," he said. "And you, Tasha, you're its voice." Evelyn looked away, overwhelmed. "I never wanted recognition, Daniel." "I know, Mom," he said gently. "But your kindness saved this hotel more than any renovation or marketing plan ever could. This isn't about fame, it's about legacy." The foundation would offer grants for women starting over after hardship. It would provide temporary housing, job training, mentorship, and most importantly, dignity. Each program designed from the stories Evelyn and Tasha had shared, from their pain, from their resilience. As the doors opened and guests began to file in, former residents of shelters, community leaders, journalists, and curious donors, Daniel stepped to the podium, his voice steady. "This hotel was built by my hands, but its soul was missing," he began, "until one winter night, my mother came to me, not with anger, but with a story about being turned away, a story about a woman named Tasha and her son Marcus, who were cold, scared, and unseen. That story changed everything." Tasha sat quietly, holding Marcus in her lap. The boy was asleep, his small head resting on her shoulder. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "You see, baby, people care. The world can change." Daniel's speech went viral. Within days, donations poured in. Former hotel employees reached out, some apologizing, some asking to return. Other hotel chains took notice. Quietly, a movement began. But not everyone welcomed the change. Behind polished boardroom doors in another corner of the city, a group of hotel magnates held a different kind of meeting. The success of Silver Crest's human-centered approach was starting to affect their business models. Their shareholders didn't want empathy. They wanted exclusivity. Their marketing didn't rely on second chances. It relied on keeping people out. This Evelyn Grace situation, one executive said, pacing in frustration. It's sentimental nonsense. And yet their filling rooms were leaving vacant. Our high-value guests are talking about it. Another chimed in, bitter. They're making compassion fashionable. The room grew tense. We need to discredit it, someone suggested. Find the cracks. There's always something to exploit. And so it began. Anonymous articles surfaced online questioning the legitimacy of the foundation. Old videos were dug up of Tasha's eviction, twisted out of context. Claims were made that Daniel's efforts were just a publicity stunt to cover up a scandal. One morning, a headline flashed across a major tabloid. From janitor to queen. Is Tasha Ford the face of a luxury hoax? Tasha read the article in silence, her hands shaking. Evelyn sat beside her, stone-faced, holding her hand. Daniel was already on the phone with his legal team. I'm sorry, Tasha whispered. I didn't ask for this. Maybe I shouldn't have said yes. Maybe I'm not the right person. Daniel hung up and turned to her, his tone unwavering. You are exactly the right person. Don't let their fear of change silence your truth. She nodded, but her heart was heavy. The whispers followed her into rooms, and though most guests treated her with kindness, she could feel the shift in some, the doubt, the curiosity laced with judgment. One evening, as she sat in the staff lounge, a young maid named Rosa approached her. She was shy, barely 18, and had been working night shifts to support her family. I just wanted to say. Rosa paused, twisting the edge of her apron. My mom, she was like you. We lost everything. But then she got help from a shelter. And now she's okay. You remind me of her, so don't listen to what they say. You're helping people like her, like me. Tasha's eyes welled up. Thank you, Rosa. That means more than you know. Later that week, during the foundation's first official fundraiser, Daniel introduced Tasha as the keynote speaker. She walked onto the stage nervously, but when she looked out into the crowd, saw Rosa's face, saw Evelyn's pride, saw Daniel's unwavering belief, her fear dissolved. I used to think my story didn't matter, she began. That the world only listened to people who wore suits and carried power in their last names. But now I know better. Power isn't just money. It's heart. It's survival. It's showing up even when the world tells you to disappear. The room fell silent. I was turned away, just like Evelyn. But instead of staying angry, she turned that moment into something beautiful. And now, because of her, and Daniel, I get to help others find their voice too. The crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation that felt like thunder. The headlines changed the next day. The woman who turned pain into power. The backlash faded. The whispers quieted. And the Silver Crest stood taller than ever, not because of its height, but because of its heart. The months that followed were nothing short of transformational. The Silver Crest Hotel, under the leadership of Daniel Carter and the heart of Evelyn Grace, became a beacon of hope, not just in the city but nationwide. Guests continued to pour in, not simply because of the luxury of the suites or the grandiosity of the chandeliers, but because there was a sense of belonging in the very air. People came seeking not only a night of comfort but a reminder that the world hadn't forgotten them. Tasha had settled comfortably into her role as the foundation's leader. She worked tirelessly, coordinating programs that helped women and children escape violence, abuse, and poverty. She listened to their stories and gave them the space to heal and rebuild their lives. She often found herself spending hours with new arrivals, offering counsel and comfort, her heart swelling with pride when she could watch someone leave the hotel with hope in their eyes, ready to face the world again. One afternoon, as she sat in her small office tucked behind the hotel's executive wing, she glanced up from her desk to see a woman standing in the doorway. Her clothes were modest, simple, but her eyes carried an undeniable strength. The woman hesitated, glancing down at the floor, and then back up to Tasha. I heard about what you're doing," the woman said, her voice shaky yet firm. "I don't have much, but I want to help." Tasha stood up immediately. "What's your name?" "Carla," the woman replied, her hands nervously fidgeting with a worn handbag. "I used to be in your position. I know what it's like to feel invisible. I was a single mother, living in shelters with my kids, but I turned my life around. I want to give back. I want to help other women." Tasha smiled, her eyes welling with tears. "Carla, you're exactly who we need. You're exactly who these women need to see. You've walked their path, and now you're standing here, ready to offer your hand." Carla's eyes softened. "I'm not sure I have the qualifications. I never went to college or anything like that. I'm just a regular person who understands pain." Tasha walked over to her, placing a hand gently on her arm. "You have something more valuable than any degree or title. You have experience. You have compassion. And that's what we need. That's what changes lives." Carla's expression shifted from uncertainty to determination, and she nodded. "Okay, I'll help." That evening, Tasha sent a message to Daniel. It was short and to the point. "We just gained another invaluable member of the team. Carla's going to help us change lives." Daniel smiled when he read it. His phone buzzed with updates from his team. But in that moment, he put it down. He looked out the large window of his penthouse office, his mind drifting to the journey that had brought him here. A year ago, he never would have imagined that a single act of cruelty would set him on this path of transformation, not just for the hotel, but for an entire community. He had witnessed the true power of kindness, of people coming together to lift each other up. His own perception of success had changed. It wasn't about profits anymore, not really. It was about people. It was about making a difference. But change was never easy, and even now, there were challenges ahead. A new set of regulations had been proposed by the local government, aimed at increasing oversight of hotels and businesses involved in social welfare programs. While some viewed it as a positive step to ensure accountability, Daniel knew there were forces at play that didn't share the same values. The law, though intended to protect, could easily be manipulated by the wrong people to stifle the foundation's growth. One morning, Daniel found himself in a tense meeting with a group of city council members and high-powered lobbyists. The topic on the table was the proposed changes to city ordinances that directly affected the Silver Crest and other establishments with similar initiatives. "This initiative of yours, Mr. Carter," a councilwoman began, her voice clipped, "is a commendable one on the surface. But what happens when too many people begin to rely on the handouts your hotel is offering? Will taxpayers be expected to foot the bill?" Daniel leaned forward, his eyes steady and focused. "What happens when too many people are left behind? When families are forced into shelters or living on the streets because they're forgotten? The system needs to change, not perpetuate the same old cycle." "Don't get me wrong," another councilman interjected, his tone condescending. "I admire your heart, Mr. Carter. But we have laws in place for a reason. Charity is noble, but at some point, someone has to pay for it." "That's where you're wrong," Daniel said, his voice growing stronger. "It's not about charity. It's about humanity. About building a community. When people are lifted out of their struggles, they give back in ways that go beyond what any law or tax code can measure. I'm not asking for a free ride. I'm asking for the opportunity to make a real impact. And the people who come through these doors are doing just that. They're building their futures. They're contributing to the economy. They're transforming their lives." The room fell silent. There were no more rebuttals. The council members exchanged uncertain glances. One of the lobbyists spoke up, his voice smooth but sharp. Perhaps we can work together on an amendment. Something that benefits both sides. Daniel didn't hesitate. We're not here to compromise on people's lives. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm telling you what's happening. And whether you like it or not, it's a movement that's already begun. The tension in the room was palpable. But Daniel didn't back down. He had spent too long watching people suffer, watching his mother suffer, to let anything or anyone stand in the way of what he knew was right. Outside the meeting, as the crisp evening air hit him, Daniel took a deep breath. He had made his stand. The battle wasn't over, but he was prepared. The Silver Crest Hotel had become a symbol, a testament to the fact that doing good could lead to real change, not just for individuals, but for entire communities. Back at the hotel, Tasha stood by the front desk, watching the new arrivals trickle in. One woman, young and fragile, entered with a small suitcase. Tasha approached her with a warm smile. "Welcome to the Silver Crest," she said softly. "You're safe here." As the woman nodded and took a seat in the waiting area, Tasha felt the weight of her responsibility. This was her calling. She wasn't just a leader in a foundation, she was a lifeline. Daniel, standing behind her in the doorway, gave her a knowing look. He had seen the same fire in her eyes that he'd seen in his own, and in that moment, he knew that this was just the beginning. They were building something lasting, something that would change the world one person at a time. And so, as the years passed, the Silver Crest grew, not just in size but in heart. The Evelyn Grace Foundation became a model for others to follow, a testament to what could happen when compassion led the way. Tasha, Carla, and many others took the baton, running forward with the same mission that had started with an elderly woman seeking a room. And for Daniel, he had finally found what he had been searching for all along, not in wealth, not in fame, but in the lives he had helped change, in the small victories, in the moments of redemption. The world was full of second chances, and the Silver Crest Hotel had become a sanctuary for those who needed them most.